This is Dr. Charles Talbot, recording for Dark Papers Entertainment. Opening message as follows. Greetings, listeners, patients, and/or Clear Minds employees. According to my notes, I am to give thanks to the following patrons. Peter Viviano, Willow, Michaela Jansen, Laura, Alexa Lynn, Kelly Harlan, Timothy O'Keefe, Yanai Ravid, Alex Peltier, and I Have No Standards. Without you, navigating these files would be near impossible. So, thank you. Truly. On another note, this episode has some serious content warnings. If you or someone you love is dealing with suicidal thoughts or addiction, please seek help and know you are loved. This episode goes to a dark place. Listener discretion is advised. That said, enjoy the show. Dark Papers Entertainment presents The Patient Files, Season 2, Episode 5, After Image.
Good morning, Dr. Talbot.
When do we start with all the formalities? I thought the big guy was all about family.
I prefer Dr. Talbot. You must be Travis.
Ugh, that is never a good tone. I promise, whatever Haley told you about me is a lie.
Just that you're a bit lazy.
Okay, that part is true.
Am I early?
Huh? Oh, no, not at all. You're right on time. We're just still going off how Colton liked to do things.
Very punctual guy. He wanted us here 5 minutes early. Get all the systems turned on and all that. I had to flip the switch.
I see.
So? Did you have a chance to read over his procedures and stuff?
I did, yes.
Alright, lay it on us, bud.
Excuse me?
Each department head always changes the system, sometimes by a lot, sometimes by a little. I'm going to be real with you, Chief. It's annoying.
Or it's fine-tuning a machine, making sure all the gears are in working order. Hey, you remember Calvin?
How could I forget? The guy shut down everything to reorganize how the rooms were laid out. Actually, we were out of work for like 2 weeks because of that construction. Good guy.
I think I get it. Yeah, I won't be making any changes.
Really?
Oh, not even a few construction projects? Look, if we have to close down the office for a few months, I'm willing to do that.
No, his system works fine.
And fine is good to you?
Simply put, I could analyze his systems on paper all day. Until I see it in action, I won't know what actually works and what doesn't. Let's just get started.
Yeah, of course. So, as you know, pick a random file and a person to read it. Or place it over there if it's a recorder.
And what about the other two?
Well, one of us takes notes about the file and writes down possible category tags. The other makes transcripts.
Huh. This coding system. I've seen something similar to this.
Oh, yeah. I just ignore those.
You better not be doing that. We have to report that code on the category forms.
Okay, aside from the forms, I ignore them. Better?
What do they mean? In Dr. Owen's office, we encountered 2 boxes, CMX1088AE and CMX0589EC.
Huh. That's weird. That should have been on the onboarding paperwork.
I skimmed it.
Skimmed it. I like you.
Okay. So it's pretty simple. CM stands for Clear Minds. You've probably figured that out. X is called a designation. It stands for, actually, anything involving the city. Rumor is that X was a placeholder. Like an unknown variable in algebra. It caught on and just became the designation. The next 4 letters or digits are decided by the department head. Like, they're project shorthand. They could be anything from acronym or just numbers.
That would get confusing really fast. You're bound to run into repeated sequences the more projects you have.
Confusing is exactly the point. Once you create a new project, you have to submit, and this will shock you, paperwork. This paperwork is how the projects are tracked. So for example, let's say you also use one of Dr. Olin's projects. What were they again?
CMX 1088AE and CMX...
Okay, that one. So 1088. Your form will have Dr. Talbot 1088 versus Dr. Olin 1088. It's an odd system, I know. But it's supposedly used for safety reasons. I guess it makes corporate espionage more difficult.
I see. What about the last two letters? AE and EC?
That's dependent on the research designation letter. So in this case, the X. AE stands for actual event, meaning the paranormal or the supernatural. EC stands for event creator. So the file likely has the thing that created an event featured. These two letters could have different meanings or different letters altogether if the designation letter is an X.
And this is why I ignore them. I didn't catch a lick of that.
That's the point, Travis. It keeps dumb people away.
Ah, yes, the whole too boring to be interesting gambit.
Do we have a code?
Of course. CM-BL-N776-GW.
Which stands for what?
Clear minds, black box, random letter, and numbers. And finally, gateway. Since, we act as an information gateway.
Okay, let's start with this one. I'll read this time. Haley, you create category tags, and Travis, you do the transcript. I'll create a rotating schedule later. Alright, what do we have here? Okay, let's just jump in. Dr. Charles Talbot, recording for Clear Minds, Black Box Division, the date is... hey, what's the date?
What, you don't know?
No, I didn't ask. I've had a lot on my plate. H. Gray said I was out for months. I didn't really think to...
It's... September 21st?
What? That's only 6 days from when we left the city.
Okay, be that as it may. Someone should have told you. You came out of the rift July 6th. I know it was only a day from when you went in, but...
Okay.
Okay? So, you're not having a breakdown?
No. City stuff.
No, can we keep him? He is way more chill than the last guys.
Yeah, I'm just gonna start over. Dr. Charles Talbot, recording for Clear Minds, Inc., Black Box Division. The date is September 21st, 2022. I'm reading from a document picked at random. It appears that this file was dictated by a speech-to-text device. Interesting. Project name, CMX6024AE. Department head, Alan Holloway. Field of study, architecture. Report as follows. It is currently day 67 since arrival. I was the second batch, or, more accurately, the second wave of volunteers to enter the city. I requested to enter through a rift held near Kyoto, Japan. I have a particular interest in Japanese architecture, specifically the Edo period, as well as Shinto shrines. My theory was that the city's buildings reflected what lay just beyond them, a theory that was proven very wrong. What it did reflect, however, was the oh-so-incredible structures of a quaint little town, which, if whoever is reading this has a file on me, will know that's similar to where I was born and raised. My theory now, of course, is that the city draws on your memory and dumps you in a place that it thinks is familiar to you, though maybe not. I have heard reports of someone from a small town ending up in a place that resembles Pittsburgh, or New York, or London, or Beijing. Perhaps it's just random. Whatever the reason, you can imagine my disappointment. You, dear reader, may be wondering why I've chosen to tell you all this backstory. In my 5th report? That would be because after weeks of non-stop driving and reaching a Detroit-like section of the city, I found something incredible. I have seemed to stumble on what appears to be a structure only found in North Japan. I was shocked, and well, just shocked, really. Right now, I am sitting in a cafe that overlooks where the temple was. Good riddance. The following is my account of what happened yesterday. After spotting the structure, I abandoned my vehicle in the street and literally ran onto the property. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was looking at a 7th century Buddhist temple, as if it had just completed construction. If you know anything about the Todaji, just picture that. If you don't, I will gladly describe it to you. Todaji is a Buddhist compound. Back in the day, it was said to have numerous buildings, such as two pagodas, a library, a lecture hall, and a refectory, and of course monks' quarters. Most of these structures were destroyed at different points in history and rebuilt and so on, but what still stands, and is always my favorite part, is the kondo, or the Great Buddhist Hall. And as luck would have it, the building I lovingly inspected was almost a one-for-one recreation of the Todaji kondo. You know, even though I can't see you, my dear reader, I can tell you have that who cares expression on your face. Well, if you saw it, you would absolutely care, architect or not. First, picture what comes to mind with a Japanese temple. A massive wooden edifice with a ceramic tiled roof, stone tile courtyard, the whole deal. Now, multiply that by a lot. It took over 2.6 million people to construct the Todaji kondo, and of course, the 16-meter or 52-foot Buddha statue at its core. For God's sake, there were 10,000 monks and 4,000 dancers to celebrate its completion. Okay, I realize I went on a surprise history lesson there, so I'll just jump right back into what you're actually interested in, and how I survived. More importantly, what I survived. So, there I stood on its grounds. Red flags that told me I should retreat to a safe location were little more than gnats in my view. I knew they were there, but chose to ignore them. There were no people, aside from myself, even present. At least, none that I could see. There were plenty of people blissfully unaware walking past on the sidewalk, but as far as the courtyard surrounding the condo, not a soul in sight. There was this haunting melody that lingered in the air. It was drifting from someplace distant and unknowable. The air itself felt heavy, like I was carrying someone on my shoulders. At that point, I had already survived my hunt. A creature that could appear from any source of water or liquid. Refer to my first report for details. After surviving something like that, I felt I could take on anything. And aside from some minor dangers, I didn't come across much that was worth reporting. So with an overinflated sense of confidence, an eagerness to explore one of my favorite types of architecture, and the excitement of discovering the next big paranormal thing, I treated the red flags like circus decorations and pressed forward. My first and really only concern was, at first of course, the Buddha statue. I admit, it took me much longer to reach it than it should have. And not because of some supernatural reason. The grounds and the details of the structure were nothing like I had ever seen, and I couldn't help but to stop and admire every detail. It was like the temple had just been built, the stone cut and laid. The beauty of that construction paled in comparison to the main attraction, however. Much like I expected, the 16-meter statue was a marvel to behold. The colossal work of art was supported by 84 massive cypress pillars. The bronze was untarnished, and it had a luster to it that was missing from the original. The part that captivated me, however, was the head itself. The usual visage of Buddha's face was replaced with an over-characterized representation of an oni, or a Japanese demon. It was painted a dull red with an oversized, exaggerated nose. Horns rested on its head and melded into the finer details of the face. 2 dark pits were punctured into the eye holes that felt like they were peering through me. My own eyes met theirs, and I was paralyzed. The details of the mask of the building began to tunnel and blur in the corner of my vision. My body lost all sensation, and gravity seemed to lose its grip on me. My focus never left those pools of darkness, even as I felt like my very being was being drawn into them. What little I could see beyond my tunnel vision began to distort, or rather, double. A feeling of nausea rose up for the briefest of time before the eyes of the Oni mask seemed to grow and expand, until all I was aware of was the darkness itself. For how long I existed in this state, I could not tell you. It felt like I was floating, or even weightless. Once all of my surroundings melted away, and all I could see was a cold and indifferent blanket of black, my mind checked out. With it, of course, went any sense of time. What little is to be had in the city anyway, but also went any real, concrete thoughts. My admiration for the building, my uneasy feelings of the statue, my curiosity, all of it gone. All I was left with was this numbness. Not apathy, not quite. It was more like a state of pause, like all I was pushed just beyond my reach. I knew I was there, but I couldn't feel it, couldn't grab onto it, nor did I want to. In that moment, if you were to give me a choice to return to life, to inherit all my baggage, all of my passions, I would have, undoubtedly, and with zero hesitation, answered with no. Although I suppose none of us truly have a say in such matters, do we? Like a car crash, all of my senses of self returned to me. It was sudden and jarring. A ringing in my ears persisted and eventually faded, replaced by the distant haunting music. I laid on the stone floor in the courtyard. Slowly, I brought myself to my feet and re-explored my body. It felt wrong, like a sock that once fit but shrank in the wash, but only slightly. The oddness of it all consumed my attention for a long moment before I let it linger around me. I was indeed in the courtyard. The condo stood before me, but the colors of the world were off. Muted, perhaps, or duller. I was so discombobulated that I hardly noticed the people around me. Aimless bodies shuffled about, almost blending into the backdrop. Their features were smudged and difficult to look at. I'm not saying they were horrifying, although I suppose in their own way they were, but rather, my eyes seemed to drift away from them. Like my mind didn't want to see them. A sinking feeling dropped into my stomach as I looked upon the condo further. A familiar pull tugged at my mind and beckoned me inside. I tore my attention away. On a very real surface level, I knew I couldn't follow this siren's call. I turned on heel and had every intention to march back to my car. The work we do at Clear Minds is important, yes, and I have risked my life on many occasions to further the company's discoveries. The idea, the mere concept of returning to that demonic, twisted version of a Buddha statue sent an icy cold fire through every cell in my body. I realized the irony. Mere moments ago, I admitted that I would stay forever in a state of suspension, if given the choice. Once I was out of it, however, it, simply put, frightened me. The disconnect from oneself, the feeling of nothing, and my body becoming a strange, alien vessel to me was far too much to handle. But, alas, the city is rarely kind. And when I reached the exit, I was shocked, but not surprised, by what I saw. As before, skyscrapers dotted the horizon, and people marched on. I even saw my car. Door opened and stopped in the middle of the street, and, of course, the faces of angered drivers maneuvering around it. These observations simmered quietly in the back of my mind as I took in the rest of the details. The entire landscape was inverted, like a negative filter had been placed over the world. What's more, when I outstretched my hand to reach beyond the exit, it came into contact with a solid force, invisible by nature, but solid all the same. I was trapped. A swelling sense of panic rose up inside me. I returned to the courtyard, my footsteps becoming more hurried as I went. I scanned the environment, looking for any other way out, my eyes skipping the blurred forms of people. The first thought I had was that any other natural exit or gate would have an unseen barrier as well. My second was to scale the stone walls that encased the property, and perhaps that could lead out. A desperate thought, of course. I've never been very athletic. The walls were smooth, with no footholds, and were designed to not only look pleasing, but be very difficult to climb. Not to mention, should I succeed, there was nothing that told me I would not encounter whatever force held me there. I needed an alternative. From everything I've heard and other files I've read, there is always a chink in the armor. No monster or haunted location or cursed relic that could not be overcome. Perhaps that isn't a true statement. It's not like I've read files that were written by those who didn't survive, although I'm sure they exist. Still, that thought, at the time, renewed me. Making a decision, I approached the nearest shade of a person. It meandered about lazily, its movements slow and sluggish. As before, my gaze seemed to want to avert, as if beholding them clearly was affront to comprehension itself. It took a great deal of effort to do so. I had to physically hold my head in place with my hands. My neck muscles protested and tried to twist away. My eyes moved to linger in the corners and would not obey my commands. I had to move so close to the thing that my entire field of view was taken up by its blurred gray hues. I'm not sure what I expected to accomplish. Perhaps it was curiosity, or, again, desperation. I thought that I would find some answers, some clues to escape wherever I was. Instead, I found emptiness. I'm not sure if there's a single word to describe it. Emptiness, although accurate, seems to do it an injustice somehow. As I stood there, occasionally moving to follow its wandering path, in a rather awkward and uncomfortable position, mind you, I saw, or rather felt, nothing from it. It's weird when I think on it. The feelings you get when you look at another person, that is. They are as wide and as varied as there are people. The obvious ones stand out, I'm sure. The primal desire when looking upon a lover. The bright and cheerful dash of emotion when seeing an old friend for the first time in years. The regret of a chance encounter with someone you wronged in your selfish youth. But these have context, a spark of emotion. Yet, it extends beyond that, doesn't it? We feel things when looking upon a stranger. Sometimes it's fear, an unknown person walking toward you in the night. Other times it's comfort. A kind old woman behind a counter of a shop you haven't entered, and only glanced her through a window as you passed by. More often than not, what we feel is muted, taking residence somewhere in the back of our minds as we go about our lives and attend to our duties. It wasn't until I relented to the strain of my neck and allowed myself to look away did I even realize it. The feelings of confusion, dread, and tinges of sadness only swirled inside me after I no longer witnessed the blurred person. Whatever I had hoped to accomplish by forcing this odd experience clearly didn't actually do anything, aside from confirming a fear. It didn't escape me. That the sense of nothing was similar to when I looked into the eyes of the statue. No sooner than I had that thought did my body feel like it was being tugged back toward the condo. Naturally, I ignored it. For a while, at least. The following hours I spent doing anything and everything except giving in to that unnatural draw. I walked around the grounds and checked each exit, examined the seams in the stone tiles, hoping to find some hidden passage. I even, very embarrassingly, tried to climb the walls. I didn't get very far. None of my attempts bore any fruit, so most of my time was spent sitting on the ground, or wandering aimlessly about the courtyard, with the occasional lie down, of course. Eventually, my stomach growled, and hunger began to work its way through me. Perhaps an odd thing to spur me on to face my fear, isn't it? Almost humorous when you think about it. The idea that all I need to face what I have spent hours, or possibly days, avoiding was the ability to get a snack. Sure, the reality of the situation was more dire. Starvation and wasting away was nothing to laugh at. Still, the thought I was about to face some demonic Buddha for a bag of peanut butter cups brought an amused smile to my face as I made my way to the condo once more. The interior was not darker exactly, just duller somehow. At some point I had realized I was not actively making an effort to walk, and instead my body moved on its own until it deposited me in front of the statue. I knew what I had to do, what was really the only thing to do, but I didn't bring my gaze off the floor. I needed a moment to commit. Truthfully, a moment to reconsider my options one final time. A new thought entered my mind then. What if I destroyed the statue? Surely that would end whatever this was, correct? Sadly, I didn't see how that was possible. Any clever solutions I had weren't feasible. In theory, I could come up with as many ways to destroy the blasted thing as I wanted, without the tools, upper or lower body strength, energy loss from hunger, and zero engineering know-how, and you get the point. In the end, I did what I felt was my only option, and perhaps, realistically, it was. My eyes met the dark pits of the Oni mask. Like before, the world around me tunneled, distorted and doubled until I was floating in darkness, separated from my body and mind. It was faster that time, but not as jarring or terrifying. In a way, it was like slipping into a comfortable bath. When I awoke on the cold stone tile of the courtyard again, I felt unsatisfied. A large part of me wanted it to last longer, or to never end. This feeling scared me. Although, I must admit, not as much as it should have. Nor did the imagery before me. When I gathered myself and sat up, the world had not returned to vibrant color, and instead it had become even more gray, even more lifeless. The shades and blurred versions of people around me still wandered about. This time, however, my eyes didn't immediately skip over them. I found myself able to keep my focus on them for a few seconds before my attention glided past them. Their pure nothingness was like skips in a record. Like reality had accidentally been bumped, and these after-images were mistakes. Or maybe I was. Perhaps in that place. I was the one disconnected. I wondered if they looked upon me with dreadful curiosity. I stood, and almost out of habit, then made my way to the exit. Same as before, I was met with a negative filtered version of the city and invisible wall. The only difference was a tow truck that had begun the process of removing my car from the street. I watched on indifferently for a while, then made my way back to the courtyard. I went through the motions of checking the surroundings, and this time, skipping my attempts to climb the wall. Each time I looked at the condo, I felt this tug on me. But that time it was different, less apparent and more subtle. The temptation to let it take me was near impossible to resist at the same time, though. The feeling of comfort was the only thing that cut through my exhaustion, and by that point, my feelings of hopelessness. More than that, however, I craved the feeling of being numb, and the feeling of simply existing in a null state. Internally, I began to argue with myself weakly. What's the harm? I can always figure it out later. And each time, this place seems to get worse. It's not worth it. It did get rid of that feeling of hunger. Did it? Or is it simply too dull to feel? Does it matter? I could die here. I could die anywhere. Why fight? Why fight what? The pull toward oblivion, or the repetition of patterns? These conflicted thoughts and a few more I don't feel comfortable putting in my official report rattled around inside my skull the entire time I aimlessly shuffled around the courtyard. Part of me wanted to stay, and the other, a growing part, wanted to return to the statue. Eventually, once again, I found myself in front of the Buddha. As I had hoped, more than feared, its hollow eyes took me yet again. That time, the transition was as natural as breathing. 1 minute I was, and the next I wasn't, and then I was again. Coming back to reality, or whatever it was especially awful that time. It was like being woken by having a bucket of ice poured over you. I can't fully describe the level of dissatisfaction that I felt as I slipped back into my ill-fitting body. As if lifting a boulder, I sat up. The courtyard was a dull grey. Only hints of color lay buried under the monotone shades. The figures that walked past, although no less smudged, seemed more familiar, like they were distant cousins at a family gathering. Not quite knowable, but welcoming all the same. My eyes felt almost no desire to look away when they fell upon them. Without meaning to, I found myself slowly making my way to the exit once more. A pattern I had set for myself. The city was unchanged. My car gone, yet life seemed to just go on, as if I had never been there. Why wouldn't it, I suppose? Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew what was happening. Similarities were all too apparent. My body shuffled to the next task, or to checking the grounds. I moved slow and uninterested. I was, without any doubt, becoming like the shades around me. Not like, but becoming a shade. What little of me that cared screamed somewhat distant and unknowable. Had I felt anything, I would have been alarmed, horrified. Had these things once been people? Lost souls wandering the grounds, stuck between a world of numb repetition and the real world. I wondered which was which. That screaming, that part of me that craved to feel, was but a whisper. A whisper I could not tolerate. I wanted, needed to be hollow, to be nothing. with only one remaining desire left, the desire to carve out anything and everything that made me think, that made me feel, I shambled my way to the condo. The state of nothingness was sublime. Even that feeling was like sharp steel in my gut when I awoke. I needed it gone. I didn't worry. If that was a thing I could even do in that state. I knew that after another round of my routine, that even my admiration for the void would be swallowed. All I had to do was wait. I began to approach the condo, with the knowledge that this time would be my last. I would truly cease to exist beyond an after-image of myself. Before entering, however, I felt a hand on my shoulder. A stranger's voice cut through my senses. "Are you okay?" The world snapped back like a rubber band pulled too taut. I was on the sidewalk of the city. The condo and the courtyard were gone. The shades of people were nowhere to be seen. The haunting hymn echoed faintly, and then was absent entirely. My thoughts and feelings slowly began to return to me in little bits. Beside me was a stranger. He held out an umbrella to shield me from the rain. Why he did so was a mystery. At that point, I was nearly soaked head to toe. Apparently, I had been standing in that very spot, facing a brick wall for hours. Mon explained to me that he noticed me on his way to work, and discovered I was still there on his way home. I didn't appear to have moved a muscle in that time. He told me all this nervously. The fact I barely responded to anything he said may not have helped. He noticed, of course, and asked his question once more. "Are you okay?" Huh. Perhaps because my feelings were still returning to me, or perhaps because I was exhausted. Whatever the case, I answered plainly and truthfully, "No. Thank you for asking." And then I walked away. So, you see, I had not escaped my encounter, nor emerged victorious. If not for the random concern, or more likely curiosity of a passerby, the condo would have claimed me. It took the rest of the night to regain all that I had lost. The next morning, I knew I needed to verify, to make sure that that cursed place was well and truly gone. At least, that's what I told myself. Before reaching this cafe and making my report, I noticed a few things that should be noted. Small things, of course. The way I liked my coffee, my favorite shirt, the smell of fresh-baked goods. All of these, and a few others, no longer interested me. I don't hate them, or even dislike them, I simply don't care. All of my big passions are still there. Romantic comedies, true crime podcast, and, of course, architecture. My hope is that those were the only things that the Buddha took. Small passions. But there is a small thought that worries me. What if the price of admission wasn't paid in full? What if that stranger only prolonged the inevitable? What if, over time, I lose everything that makes me who I am? A more frightening question. Am I afraid of that? Or do I look forward to it?
Travis, you get all that?
Sure did. Want me to read it back?
That won't be necessary. Haley, did you get all the category tags that fit this file?
Yep. It was a pretty simple one.
Good. Submit this to archives, and let's start on another.
Yeah.
Is there a problem?
No. Not a problem per se. It's just, well, Colton would have us discuss each file after. Theories, how they made us feel, so on.
Oh, cut the new guys some slack. Personally, I always hated this part. Colton was way too much in his feels.
First of all, I'm not Colton.
Right, I didn't mean...
Second, I have zero interest in being either of your friends. We are here to do a job. This does not include talking about our feelings or coming up with theories that do not concern us. We will not be grabbing lunch together, having a game night, and for the love of God, I could not care any less what your favorite food is. Do I need to go on, or is my point clear?
Understood.
Crystal, Chief.
No cute little nicknames. My name is Dr. Talbot. Now, let's get back to work. I think that's the last one for the day. Haley, submit the file and let's close up shop.
And with 10 minutes left on the ship.
7.
Whatever. 7 minutes.
Is there anything else you need us to do?
No.
Okay, then.
Alright. You got this. Let's start, the food court. Everyone likes food, right? Okay, let's see. Buffet style. Looks like a cafe or coffee shop. Place has tacos. Got to remember to tell H. Gray later. Oh, there, sushi bar. Okay, casual. I could do casual. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I know you're trying to find a table. Or I guess you could be going back to your room. Or the office. Nothing wrong with eating and working, of course.
Did your rambling have a question?
Right. My name is Dr. Charles Talbot.
Is that a question?
No. I'm thinking about trying sushi. I've been told I play it safe with my food choices.
Really? You stopped me for sushi recommendations.
Honestly, no. I'm not good at this. Okay, I thought I would start off with casual conversation first, but it's not my strong suit.
Clearly.
You're Dr. Rowan Vita, right? I looked you up in the Clear Minds database. I came across your name in a file, and I had a few questions, if you don't mind.
It's my lunch hour. Maybe another time, or not at all.
Dr. Gavin Olin.
What about him?
H. Gray was right, that does work. Yeah, you two were involved in an older project together, right?
We were.
Well, it was mostly redacted. I was only able to read the project name and the names of those involved. That's not entirely true either. Yours, Dr. Olin, and Dr. Beckett's names were available, but there was one more that
I'm going to stop you there. Do I need to explain to you what clearance means?
I'm a department head. I should have proper clearance. Perhaps there's still red tape then.
Trust me, it won't. Also, it has nothing to do with your job in the black box.
You know who I am.
Dr. Charles Talbot. You're a new hire, that's something to make note of. Now, if you don't mind...
Oh, yeah, again, sorry for interrupting you. Actually, one more question. The project name was CMRD066GHE. RD. I notice your department is Research and Development. Is that what RD stands for?
No. Research and Development's tag is TA, Technological Acquisitions. This has been... something. Have a day.
Interesting.
How'd it go?
Not sure. Might be a dead end.
What happened?
Well, like you said, I looked into Dr. Olin's past projects. I wasn't able to find much.
Yeah, I know. We went over this.
Yeah, well, Dr. Vita wasn't very forthright. They're closed off. Not surprised. I did learn how the projects are labeled, and the project they worked on together didn't involve research and development.
Keep pressuring him. It's not like we can turn to Beckett. Turn up the charm.
Charm. Sure.
Right now, they're our only lead.
Alright. Speaking of, how's your search for Donahue going?
It's not. Right now, I'm stuck doing whatever missions they send me on. The other field agents keep me at arm's length, especially the captain. I may have found a way in, though.
That's good to hear, just be careful. If Clear Minds finds out we're poking around...
I know. Getting fired is the least of our concerns if that happens. If that's all, I gotta get back to the barracks. I still can't believe you get your own room, and a nice one at that.
Perks of the job.
Have a good night, Talbot. Watch your back.
Yeah. You too.
Computer, voice mode. Open email. To DA6789 at subject CM-X-Charles. Progress update. Email body. Dr. Charles Talbot is mostly as expected. His ability to perform the job is not only acceptable, but exceeds previous department heads. This is most likely credited to his time in the city, and thus doesn't need an ingestive period. That said, I have concerns. In my past experiences, other department heads make revisions to the organization system, of which Charles does not seem to have an interest. Additionally, he actively rejects any attempts of personal connections. All work and no play is a common mindset for this position, but this is different somehow. These may seem like minor issues, but it is my personal recommendation that we consider retirement for him. Simply put, I don't think the potential gains outweigh the risks. Signed, HW. Send email.
Showrunners for this episode were Christopher George and Dalton Lewis. This episode was written by Christopher George. Script editing was done by Dalton Lewis. Sound design was done by Christopher George. Charles Talbot was voiced by Christopher George. Haley was voiced by Abby Ledzinski. Travis was voiced by Kevin Ledzinski. Dr. Vita was voiced by Celine Gray. And H. Gray was voiced by Michael Williams. Original music by Nico from the Inky Paw Print.